In today's video, I am going to share all about how I taught my children to read. So if you are just beginning to homeschool, if you have littles that are approaching that stage where you think it's time for them to learn how to read, stick around. So by now, you probably have heard a little bit about how to teach your children how to read. Whether you are already homeschooling and you're talking to other homeschool moms or just to other parents in general, you have heard that you should be reading to your children, that reading to your children is the first and most important part of teaching your children how to read. Well, that is definitely true, and that is definitely my number one tip as well. But I have a slightly different piece of advice that I want to share with you. So first of all, if you are a Charlotte Mason or a classical homeschool, or you're thinking along those lines, or even if those are not the types of homeschooling that you are interested in, reading your children classics is very, very important. And I definitely think that is an important thing to do, to read classics to children from the youngest of your children all the way up. And the importance of that is because it teaches them to understand and think in a more complex, rich language, rather than what a lot of homeschooling communities like to call twaddle. Twaddle is when books are written in a really basic, simple language. We've all read those books that are just a bit boring, they don't add any flair to it. It just says, so-and-so said, and she replied, and then they went here, and it's just this sort of very basic narrative. So classics are very important. Definitely read classics to your children. But there is a place for what others might call twaddle. And that is when you are reading with your child, have them alongside with you. And then particularly when they're interested in actually wanting to see the words that you're reading, where you can read and follow along with your finger. You're reading words with sight words and words that are a lot more basic and easy for them to recognize and see, and that they'll see around them. For example, the word stop was a word that my kids, before they learned how to read, began recognizing. They started to recognize the word stop in stop signs. They would see it in books and they're like, that's stop. That says stop. And they were so proud of themselves because they could recognize the word stop. So I really also highly recommend reading to them. This is not necessarily when you're going to get them to learn how to read. They're great books for them learning how to read as well. But read to them these simple little books. This was a favorite of my kids. They're Dr. Seuss, rhyming, simple single syllable words, 3-letter single syllable words by Dr. Seuss. This was one of their favorites, Hop on Pop. And I would read it to them and they would frequently ask, can you read Hop on Pop? And they loved it because it was funny and because they could recognize the words. And then they would begin to actually, they might have the story memorized. They might not actually be reading, but they would follow along and they would know what was coming next. They could remember the words and they would associate that with reading. But it grows in an interest and a desire for them to read, and they begin to actually recognize that reading is decoding symbols that are associated with particular sounds. So when you're reading to them, don't just read to them the classics. Read them rhyming, simple books with rhyming words. Hop on pop, up, pup, pup is up, cup, pup, pop in cup. And you're following along and showing them the words you're reading. They enjoy it, as well as it's helping them to start to recognize the decoding of reading. So don't discount the simple little books to read to them. They still read them the books with the rich language, but also read them these books that they can follow along and you're pointing out the words you're reading, because that will already begin to grow in them the interest and the recognition of this code that can be such a struggle for our kids to learn. So the next step in teaching your kids to read, first of all, When they're really little, some kids learn to read at a very young age, and you will see the signs that they are wanting. They're showing an interest. They'll say, "What does this say?" Or they're actually trying to read things or write, not write that necessarily, but read things and sounding things out. And they're interested. They want to follow along with your finger. So those are signs. And the first step in teaching your kids how to read is letter recognition. But I want to suggest there's a better way of just simply teaching your kids the ABCs and understanding that A is this symbol here is the letter A, and it's called A. And this symbol here is the letter B, and it's called B. And this letter here, and so forth. First of all, not all letters say their names. And the letter names themselves is not as important as the letter sounds. So when you are saying A, this is the letter A, remember that's what it's called, and it says and it says and it says lots of different things, it can get confusing. You're actually stacking on 3 different pieces of information: the symbol, its name, and what it says. Well, Stephanie Hull came up with a curriculum that skips one of those steps. And I found this early on when I began homeschooling. So my kids actually got to use this from the beginning, and I saw really dramatic results from it. They automatically learned how to associate the sounds with each letter before needing to necessarily know what the letter was called. And that comes along pretty easily afterwards. You can sing the ABCs, sing the song, and they begin to recognize which ones go with which sound in the song, which name in the song. But what she does, so she's got several books in this series, and she also has other books that she writes as well, all related to education. But this is the first one called ABC, See, Hear, Do, Learn to Read. And this is the level 1 book, and she begins with uppercase letters. Let's throw out the confusion of teaching them that there's an uppercase and there's a lowercase, and this is the big one, this is the little one, remember that. That's a lot of information to begin maybe potentially teaching to your 2-year-olds, which could be an age where they might begin, or 3. I began with my daughter when she was 3 with this one. So what this does is, and she has them not in alphabetical order. She actually begins with the letter C. And you're not going to say the letter C. You're just going to go, this symbol says, and it tells you what to do. Curl your hands like claws and scratch. And you could even say a cat says but they're going to recognize this C symbol. And when they see this, you're going to practice every week. You're going to add in a one, whatever pace you like. We just did a new sound each week a new one, and we would review the old ones. And it was fun because it was taking actions and sounds, and then you would just gradually add in each week, whatever pace that they would like to work at. The next one is this ant. And you don't have to necessarily just say, they see this, and they go, ah, because it says to throw your hands in the air like you're scared. Ah, so this letter says, ah. And then T is a turtle going, t, t, t. You're kind of like how a parent might scold or tut, t, 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 t. And it's a turtle tapping the air, t, t, t. And E, iguana, E. Also wave your hands in the air back and forth, E for iguana. Well, my daughter took from this book, began to be able to sound out words for herself. We would sound out the word cat, k, 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 ah, t, t, t. Put that together, k, k, ah, t, t. And she learned how to read just by doing this book and this book alone. It was a great, great beginning. They loved it. They had fun with it. There were no tears. There was no pressure. And it skips that extra step that I believe can make things more complicated for your kids sometimes. It just simplifies it. She then moves on to the lowercase letters, and she has other series. Now, this is the only one we did, and we moved on then to other things, but it was an amazing first step. Now this book comes in a book, and you can see here I have it in these. I cut it apart. I cut the binding off because I wanted them to be more like flashcards. So I cut them out and I just put them inside plastic sleeves in a binder. But it comes in a soft covered book, and I purchased mine from Amazon. So after we did this book, when she was then 4, we began the Good and the Beautiful's language arts program for kindergarten, their pre-K book, but we also got these reading booster A cards. This is their first book, then they have B, and I'm not sure how far it goes. We only purchased this one, but she really enjoyed this. Because my daughter, my youngest, she was maybe not as ready and eager to jump into, full on, curriculum. She loved the fun and colorful and games. And of course, every kid loves that, really. Like, which kid wouldn't love that? But this really was something that she enjoyed, and it worked really well for her. So it started out the very, very beginning. What the sounds of the vowels, short vowel sounds, long vowel sounds, and then beginning to recognize the sounds of each consonant. And so we flew through that because she knew all the sounds associated with letters. And then you might just begin understanding that some letters have 2 sounds. G says G and J and things like that. They began to do early blending sounds, and then 3 letters, blending 3-letter words together. She really loved these what do you call it? A pyramid. These reading pyramids where it would just be with 1 letter, a mat fit, a mat fit in a mat fit in a hut. And by the end of this pyramid, she's reading a full sentence, and she was only at 4 years old. And so that was this really fun experience for her to be proud of herself and know that she was reading.
Hear the birds and see the sun. Side by side our fears are done. Oh, the good times just begun. We know what we have, let's hold on tight. Found what we're looking for in life.
But going through, after learning the sounds, you really want to get a basic phonics program. We did 2 of them. And I wouldn't say that you necessarily, I'm not going to say these are the best, go with these, this is what you need to get for your children. I feel like most phonics programs, I've looked at several, they really all teach the same things. They're all pretty equal in being able to teach your children to read. You might just want to look at different formats of things that, like this, I felt was more fun for my daughter at age 4. And then we moved up to something that was a bit more drier, but did its job. And at that point, she didn't mind because she was interested. She wanted to read. She enjoys reading and was okay with it just being black and white words on a page, dryness. The Good and the Beautifuls also came with these little readers. So they would be reading all of these little readers. There's 2 box sets, but they were simple. They gradually built up to, by the end, she was reading pretty. I was very excited to see the bigger words she was learning how to read. And so these are just simple readers, and it makes them, you go through all the different sounds. It's related to which sounds they're learning in the lessons. So I really recommend getting, along with your phonics program, getting some beginner readers, phonics books, like easy books. So we have also these Bob books that we purchased. We have, I think, 3 or 4 different sets of these where they tell stories. Mac had a bag. And it's just very simple, but she loved reading these, and she would read these to me at bedtime. She'd read them to me at the day, and it was something that she was proud of, that she could finish a whole book on her own. So essentially any phonics program is really doable. What I loved about the Ordinary Parent's Guide to Teaching Reading by the Well-Trained Mind is this book is the entire reading program. This takes you from the step 1 all the way up to the end of where they believe they should be able to move on to reading chapter books. So I believe it takes them up to about a grade 3 reading level, all the way up through. So you don't do this in 1 year. You can take your time through it. You could do it in 1 year, but it takes them up to a grade 3 reading level. My daughter's past it. I feel that she's already reading all the words, but we've continued through it, progressing slowly, because I just want to make sure that we've covered all the different blends and sounds and that we're not missing anything. But that's what I love about this, because I have heard that other reading programs like All About Reading can be quite expensive, and you're buying all the accessories and things to go with it, and you have to buy each level each year, where this is all the levels, all the years. And I believe this book was $40 to $50, and it's everything in there. It also gives you suggestions to, of course, flashcards are really important. So some words that don't fit the phonics rules, so sight words, it would instruct you to write out the sight words on cue cards, and you'd hold up the cards, and we did all of that as well, all the flashcards. So you don't even have to go out and buy all the fancy flashcards and things like that. That's one thing that I love about the Well-Trained Mind. Susan Wise-Bauer really wanted to make homeschooling cost-effective and but very thorough, and so we have loved this program. But really, any and all phonics programs really are equal in what they're teaching, and so you just have to do what works best for you. 2 tips that I have when it comes to teaching your kids to read is don't push them. Keep the time short unless they want to go longer, and get them to read every day. Practice is everything, but don't push them to read longer. If they're getting tired out, if they're just reading 1 page and 1 page they're feeling frustrated, then really stop there and carry on the next day. Because the more you push them, the more they will resent it and begin to hate reading and not learn the love of reading. Now, to build that love of reading, it's really important to read great books and to them, and also show them that you also love to read as well. I think it's really important to show them that reading is a fun pastime and that it's very enjoyable. And thirdly, to add a third point in is, we all know this, but I feel like I need to add this into the video, is that reading can be, the love of reading can be impaired by too much screen time, or for some, any screen time. If a child is given the option to choose to read or go on screens, really, they are going to choose to go on screens. It's less work, it's addictive, and it's just it's a shorter way of becoming entertained without having to do the work to get to that place of imagination and doing the work of reading yourself. I'm not suggesting you have to be screen free, but putting limits on the amount of screens and setting a time aside for reading is really important. You may have to say, it's reading time. We're all going to sit now and read our own books, because sometimes the love of reading isn't going to just be automatic. You may have to actually say, it's time to read, and everyone has to have their time of reading without other forms of distraction. But I hope that all made sense. If you have any questions, if you want to see anything else further, or if you have any specific videos that you are interested in seeing me make, let me know, comment below. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.